We're back for another episode of Creative Retrospective, and my guest for this one is Moyo Abiona, also known as Moyo, also known as Moyo's Laboratory if you follow her on socials. So she's, I mean, I can list out all the things she's done in terms of like the sports space, but notably been part of the GoalDiggers podcast, of course, and also working alongside Faye and Suzanne on the Guardian's Women's Football Weekly.
Yes.
So usually, so I don't know if you know my style, but I like to just go straight into it. I don't really do a lot of like small talk and stuff like that. But one thing I'm actually gonna do that I wouldn't usually do on the show, but I actually think it's quite interesting. So
Right.
when I was doing the Vinyl Collective, this was like 3.5 years ago now.
Mhm.
And we were talking about Heady One's album, Edna, at the time, and we
Right.
had Aura on. And because the studio we were doing that wasn't too far from where Ori was. So I dropped her home and stuff like that. And we were talking. And I think I mentioned your name in something because also I've been following you for a long time, following your stuff. And she's
Yeah.
like, hey, you know, she's my sister, right? I was like, what the fuck? Like, I had no idea the whole time. I was like, what? And I think, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, right? But when I was kind of looking at both you guys kind of like creative disciplines, obviously, Ori's a lot more into like music, sport,
Yeah.
film. She's in
So,
sport a bit, but do you know what I mean? So
yeah.
was it intentional where like back then, so obviously this is like 3-4 years ago now, was it intentional to be like, oh, we're not gonna make it a thing that we're sisters, we're just kind of just doing our own content, or am I just missing the mark here?
No. It's like it wasn't an intentional thing, but like me and her always say that we don't think our personalities are the same, but we have very similar interests. Like I feel like our interests are the same.
Mm-hmm.
So like sport, music, film has always been our like bonding area. And then
Yeah.
she's always been someone that can write. Like she writes.
Mm-hmm.
I don't enjoy writing, but
Same,
like
same.
I prefer like speaking. Like
Mm-hmm.
if I want to discuss something, I don't want to do it via message,
Yeah.
or like typing it up. So yeah, it's nice though because we both have our own things and then we can come together to enjoy those things as well, which has been
Mm-hmm.
good.
Yeah, so I was gonna say, do you guys have a lot of content together? I know you guys have gone to like United Games together, but do you guys actually create content together?
So we don't, but we have once.
Mm-hmm.
We did when Arsenal did their All or Nothing.
Yes. Yeah.
So we went to do the red carpet there and we
Okay.
like were interviewing people. Like we got our own content, but we were interviewing like people that were coming. And that was anyone from like music stars to
Okay.
like footballers. Like we interviewed some of the Arsenal lot. And that was the first time we've done any sort of like actual crossover, which was
Okay.
strange.
When was that? Sorry, but that old enough was what, 2 years ago, right? I think it
Yeah,
was.
yeah,
Yeah.
like 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So it was at the premiere. It was
Mm-hmm.
fun. It was fun.
Yeah. Why did
And
you
we
stop?
said,
Yeah.
listen, we said at the time, we were like, oh, we need to do some more stuff together. And we absolutely have not since.
That's fair. And yeah, just another quick question. In terms of like your name, is that just a reference to Dexter's Lab, or am I getting it wrong?
Yeah, no, it is a
Yeah.
reference to Dexter's Lab. And I like, so I made that my Twitter name used to be something else, but this is years ago,
Mm-hmm.
when like 2011. And then I changed it to Moy's Laboratory because of Dexter's Lab in like 2013. Like
Okay,
I
cool.
just rewatched the series and I was like, oh, and
Yeah.
everyone at that time was doing those like cute, quirky names.
Yeah.
They were either doing like a celebrity's name, like their name and a celebrity's name, yeah, or they were doing like cool, like either like cartoon style or like anime type crossovers. So I
Yeah.
was like, you know what? Let me jump on that. Let me do that. And I've not changed it since. And I won't lie, a couple people have told me like to change. They were like, oh, like when you start like interviewing and stuff, like don't you want it to just be your name on your Twitter? I said, boy, I can't change it now. It's too
Yeah.
late.
It's too late. Yeah. You're too locked in. Yeah. Okay, cool. So kind of going back, so obviously your main kind of interest in terms of sports, I know you cover a bunch of different sports, so obviously your main love would be in football. Again, usually I wouldn't ask in terms of, oh, why do you cover football? Obviously because you like it, but in terms of your genesis into football, because I don't know if you have any brothers and stuff like that, so it's not very common in like a all women household. There's like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, we're gonna get into football and like go to the matches and stuff like that. So how did that come about for you?
Um, so my dad is a very big sports fan. Like when I was growing up,
Mhm.
he would watch everything. And I feel like that sort of trickled down to me because now I watch everything.
Yeah.
Like I remember there was a point he was working like nights and he'll call us and he'll be like, oh, tell me the cricket score. So it's just like if you don't understand cricket, yeah, you're seeing numbers. You won't even know how to
Mhm.
explain what the numbers are. Like you're
Mhm.
seeing 123-6 and you're thinking,
Yeah. Yeah.
So like we would have to like you start watching like little by little. He would watch Formula One, like he was a big Michael Schumacher fan.
Yeah.
Um, lots of cricket, lots of tennis, lots of football. But football was the thing that everyone in the house watched. So me, my sister, my mum,
Right.
and dad all watched football. And I always say to people that like it was so easy for me to like buy into football because so obviously he supports United. I started supporting United from the beginning. And it was, you know, some people, their parents are like support the team, but that it's not a good team. So when
Yeah.
your team is not good, yeah, like you won't want to opt into that.
Yeah.
Like if I woke up one day and my dad was like he supports Watford or something, I'll be I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I can't go with you there.
Yeah.
But this one was like United, we were winning at the time, so it was like there wasn't really much fight back from me. I was like, yeah, like all right, we support this team, then we all support this team.
Yeah.
Obviously now it's not so fun, but
Yeah.
we're locked in. So
Yeah, I get it. It was funny because when I was growing up, again, my dad was a massive football fan, and he was a fan of Liverpool at the time. And my sister's a huge United supporter as well. So because me and my sister like we were a bit competitive, so I was like, okay, I'm gonna support Manchester City, and I supported them during the shit days.
ooh,
Yeah,
the
really
hell?
weird, right? Yeah. So like literally
Stephen Island times.
like I remember when they got like Europa, I was like, oh my gosh, like Sean Wright Phillips, he's sick. Like, I was one of those people. And
Then
then
Johnny.
yeah. And then like when I was like a young teenager, I switched to Liverpool, and this was during the shit days as well. So I feel like I missed the good days of City, and I went right into the shit days of Liverpool. So I fully know what you mean with
you've
that.
gone for it. You've gone for
Yeah.
it.
Oh man. So again, so what another fun thing between I guess me and you, I don't know if you know. So my hometown is also Bermondsey, right? And one thing about
I
people
didn't
with
know that.
yeah, so one thing about Bermondsey people, one, we always have a weird accent. I feel like it's South London, but it's like it's like we're basically East London in a sense. Yeah. And the other thing is when they're Millwall Football Club, and if you don't know, Millwall Football Club is quite an intense place. So in terms of like growing up and being around a football town, was kind of being near such like I guess a popular football town any influence on you at the time, or did you have any like relationship with anyone in the area or the club?
Like I remember, I always think back to when I was in primary school, and I went to a primary school that was predominantly white. Obviously, let's be real. Anyone that lives in Bermondsey and is over the age of 23, maybe, yeah,
Yeah.
the primary school was predominantly white. And I remember because I was speaking to one of my friends at the time, and she was like, "Oh, what football team do you support?" And then she didn't even let me answer, but she was like, "Well, obviously you support England because you're English." And I was thinking, "No, I ain't," but cool. And then she was like, "And then you support Millwall because you live in Bermondsey." And I was like, well, my relationship with Millwall is that they're the team that when they would play, my dad would call us and be like, "Millwall lost, get home." Like,
yes,
not smashing cars. Like,
yes.
So my relationship with Millwall wasn't one that's like, oh my god, I feel so like patriotic. I feel so involved with them. But I will say that the culture in Bermondsey was that football was always around, and I guess because Millwall is literally in the heart of where we live, you'd walk past pubs, there'll be tons and tons of people outside pubs on match days, after match days. Like when Millwall have a match at 7, people in the pub from like 10 a.m. It's not like it's not like in the couple hours leading up to the game. They're locked in from the beginning. And I guess like you get that sort of like passionate fan experience when you live in that sort of area. And I'd probably say it did add, but just not towards Millwall.
Yeah, no, I get it. Yeah, because I literally used to live literally by like South Bermondsey Station, so literally right by the main pub. Exactly. So, yeah, so I know what you mean. So okay, so like kind of fast forwarding again, I was trying to like look this up when I was doing my research and stuff like that. But in terms of like your emergence into like I guess social media kind of punditry and stuff like that, the first thing I saw from you was like GoalDiggers, and that was about 4 years ago, about almost exactly 4 years ago. I think you came on like season 2 and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So one thing is what I know about GoalDiggers, it's kind of like Touchline Africa, where it's like just a bunch of people, you don't know who you can't name all the people behind it. It's like a massive super group, like Odd Future. So what was your relationship like with the people behind GoalDiggers? How did you get involved with it 4 years ago?
Yeah, so I used to tweet about sport. I'm saying I used to tweet about sport.
Yeah, I was gonna say
tweet about sport now. But like I was tweeting about sport. And I remember Anita, who was one of the founders of GoalDiggers, essentially messaged me. She DM'd me and was like, "Oh, I always see you tweeting about sports. I mean, I always see you tweeting about football. I guess that means you're a football fan. And then she told me about the idea that she wanted to start GoalDiggers. And it sounded great. And at the time, I was about to start a grad scheme in Leeds. So I was like, I can't really join right now. Like, you lot film in London, and I'm gonna be literally living in Leeds. So I was like, oh, thanks so much for considering me. Like, when I'm done with my grad scheme, I'll shout you again. And then obviously COVID happened in 2020.
Yeah, I was just about to say, yeah.
Maybe like 5 months later, and I was like, hi, like if you still remember me,
yeah.
I still tweet and I still like football. And yeah, so Anita literally told me to come down to like we recorded one virtually, and I got to meet some of the people that were on the pod. And then she said, when you come back down to London, let's do one in the flesh. So I was like, cool. Went to record one, and then obviously they add you to the group chat afterwards. Then you see how many people are like in the group.
Yeah, how many people are in this? Like, how many people are like active? I guess members of GoalDiggers, like rotating guests for that.
Because honestly, like we get new members. It's not all the time, but like there's periods when they're like, okay, we're looking for new members. So there's 18 of us in the chat right now. So 18. Yeah, no, it's a lot. It is a lot, but it's funny because I always felt like, so most of my friends do not watch football. They don't watch sport, but they don't like football. They don't really watch either. And I always used to be like, I'm one of those people, that I absolutely do not care if you don't watch what I'm about to talk about.
Yeah,
I'm about to talk about it. So you can listen, you can learn, but I'm gonna talk about it. And I used to always talk about it with them, and they'll be so confused, and I still would just go on. And GoalDiggers was the first time that was like, you're talking to people about this thing that you love, and everyone there is like fully in the know. Like you're not having to explain anything. And it was my first taste of like being surrounded by people that actually had the same interests. Like even though we were very different people, like some of the people in GoalDiggers like had completely different like lives to each. Like we all are very different, but because of this one common goal, it's so strange. Like we feel so connected to each other. Like every time we have team meetings, obviously not everyone records on the same day, so you see like 5 people.
Yeah.
You see like 5 people when you're recording. You don't actually see. I remember we did a social one time, and I met like 3 people for the first time at that social. I'd literally never seen them before. Like you turn up and then you're like, oh, okay, cool. And then you just start talking, and it feels natural to talk.
Right, yeah.
Just because like you already have that one connection. It's like we're part of this thing. And it's nice because also we all like different things outside of football. So like football is our common like thing.
Yeah, of course.
But outside of that, like some people are really big music lovers, some people are really into film, some people are really into fashion. And like we get to know these new people that we would have never known if not for GoalDiggers. And we just get to add them to like a lot of those girls, like I'm saying a lot, all of them I'd consider friends. Like we speak outside of doing recordings. And it's nice to have that sense of community.
Yeah, like finding your tribe, right? Essentially.
Yeah, exactly that.
Yeah. Exactly. And it was funny when you said that you said you met 3 people and like they were part of GoalDiggers. Sometimes, like when I see a woman talking about, it's kind of like, you know, like that joke where it's like, oh, if you see a group of white people together, they could be like the chain smokers. That's kind of how I feel when I see women talk about football. I'm like, she's probably just part of GoalDiggers. I can never tell who's like outside like Anita and yourself. I can never tell who's like the main group.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, we do be tapping people up. Like sometimes when we're out and we see like some people are like, oh, they're talking. And I'm thinking, you wanna join the pod?
Yeah. And then speaking of interest, like you said, people have different interests. In terms of like you said, like sport was like a big thing in your house. Did you ever play when you were young?
Yeah, I used to play like I used to do so many sports. I did basketball, I did football, I did athletics. And then like, you know, like classic story, like your knee goes, but my knee had actually gone at the age of maybe 11. So,
yes.
Like I had a bad knee syndrome, let's call it. When I was like 10, 11, I was in primary school. So really young, like not even old enough to have even had knee problems.
Yeah.
And I remember that I did physiotherapy for like 6 months because of it. And they were like, yeah, you need to cut down your sports. Like when you get to secondary school, you need to cut down your sports. I
So
was
we're
like,
not even in secondary school yet.
I wasn't even in secondary school at this point.
Jesus.
I was
All
like,
right, cool.
oh, I will. As soon as year 7 started, I said, yeah, basketball, football.
Yeah.
What else? Netball, cool.
Mhm.
Athletics. Oh yeah, I'm down. Like I would literally say yes to everything. I love
Gosh.
sport.
Yeah.
And every time I look back now as like an adult, I'm just like, why did like I'm saying why did I stop? Obviously, I know why I did, but
Yeah, of
like I
course.
just
Yeah.
shouldn't have stopped everything.
Mhm. Which one
Yeah,
would you like to carry on if you could keep going? Which one would you like to carry on?
I loved basketball, and I always felt like I couldn't even put like the team I was in at the time was there was no in the middle. Like you have to be all in. Like a
Yeah.
lot of the players that were on those teams, like went like got scholarships in America. Like they were
Oh
serious
wow.
about
Okay.
yeah, they were serious about basketball. And every time I would go to sessions there, like you're pushing yourself to the limit. And then I would go home and I'm like, I'm literally limping. And I was just like, I can't even give it my all in the way that I would want to physically. But yeah, that's my one regret if I could go back in time.
Oh, interesting. All right, cool. I didn't know that. That's quite cool. And again, kind of circling back to GoalDiggers, I think one thing that was so fun to watch with GoalDiggers is how like popular it got over time so quickly. Because I think it was essentially a first of its kind in some way. And then the year after you joined GoalDiggers, joined BBC Sounds, and that must be quite a big jump up, kind of going from this is something fun to do, but I've got a grad scheme to go on to. Now it's like, okay, live on BBC Sounds, like check us out. How was that for the first time?
Yeah, it like it's funny because when the pod started initially, like people were watching and people were listening, yeah. And it's funny that because now that AFCON is on, I get it more because some people hate watching, like some people hate listening, yeah, because they wanted it to be bad, and then they were surprised that it wasn't.
Was there a lot of fans like people on Twitter just kind of getting like you talking shit?
I remember, and I think Anita had done a tweet saying, "I'm gonna start this." Like, I think she'd gotten into it with someone on Twitter, as you do.
Okay. Yeah,
as
it goes, as it happens. Yeah,
and then she was like, "I'm when I start this women's pod, like, we're not gonna be listening to you like that tweet like XYZ." And I remember because when they did the first post, like the first pod, it was like as a direct reply to when she said that.
Oh, that's quite petty. I like that.
Yeah. So people were obviously thinking, oh, like, I want to put this pod in the ground. Like, so they went there with the intention to hate listen or hate watch. And I think they were just surprised that it was literally just girls talking about football. Like, when you actually strip it down to its basics, it's literally like, do you like football pods? Yes or no? That's the first question. No, do you like football? Do you like football pods? Third, do you want to listen to a football pod? Yes or no? As opposed to like what it may have seemed to someone from the outset. But yeah, when it transpired from the initial first couple pods, we're in this tiny studio. Like when we look back, first of all, to the studios we've used in the past, we're always like, boy, we've
gone away. Yeah, like sound issues and all that. Yeah, I understand.
Sound issues, like no aircon. Like honestly, it's funny because we use one in Bermondsey, and I always like we used one in Bermondsey, and I was gassed that we were using that studio here because I was thinking this is 5
minutes. Just walk home. Yeah.
Like, but when I look at the studio we're using now and I compare it to that one, boy, the level has changed. Like, so when I look, so like just in general, like the process has always been that we want to just keep leveling up. Like we had a team meeting the other day and we were talking about like our goals and stuff for the pod. And I think just having people within the pod that actually set us targets. In the beginning, they may have seemed like unrealistic targets, but like the more and more we do stuff, it's just like, no, like we have to put our standards high if we're going to achieve what we want to achieve. And it's just been nice as well because when we did those pods that were outside of GoalDiggers, so like for example, when you mentioned the BBC Sound stuff, that was the first time that it was like, cool, this is someone else's platform and they want to include us. Because obviously you can start your own, you can always start your own pod. And I think sometimes it feels nice for someone else to be like, you know what, come on my platform.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was nice. It was a nice moment for sure.
And in terms of like the women thing, is that still a sticking point to this day when you talk to people, or have people kind of just gone over it now? I feel like it's quite maybe it's just from my purview, like it's quite normalized, or is it still a thing that kind of comes up like, what? Like, so like, yeah.
I think on like in a normal sense, yes, like people are fine, like people are have come to terms with it, but then you see little things that happen, like even just the other day with the Joey Barton stuff, and
Yeah,
it's just
oh
like,
gosh, yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, and people like him exist. Like people like him on Twitter. Like I remember when I think a couple of weeks later there was something that happened on Sky Sports, and I saw people like men at Joey Barton saying, "At Joey Barton, have you seen this?" And I was thinking, "Ugh, is he your master? Like, how is
Yeah,
that?"
yeah.
That is literally gross. And obviously people like that exist, but they're very much, I would say, from what we've experienced, the minority on a day-to-day basis. And then but we do get it. So when there's like an extra controversial statement that's said on the pod, obviously that is just part and parcel of it. Like if you're gonna say controversial statements, male or female, you're gonna get backlash.
Of course, yeah.
But obviously, if the reasoning for the backlash is tenfold when you're a woman, basically.
Of
Like
course, yeah.
people will be in the comments sometimes, yeah, and be like, "Oh, like this is what I mean about girls having that," and it's just like, "Oh, boohoo!" Like
Yeah.
honestly, and I think that's where it helps as well, though, that GoalDiggers, in terms of like the numbers that are on it, like there being 18 of us, like we've got a nice support system of like, even if you're getting corned in the comments, like we can laugh about it in the chat, and there's,
Cool.
you know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Yeah, and in terms of that's one of the things I was going to ask you next about in terms of like critiquing players, because I think that's one way I kind of relate to you in that sense. Because when like one of the most sensitive group of people ever is music, people who make music, right? So when you're critiquing people's music, and let's say it's like people who you may know, people get so touchy, and not even that, the fans get touchy as if they're the music artists themselves. And I
they
just
think they're them.
I just said Drake's album was okay. You're taking it as if I'm saying like you're the worst person in the world. And like
it feels personal to them.
yeah, exactly. And then, but the thing is, I'm a tough guy, right? So I'm just like, whatever. I'm still gonna call your favorite artist shit. Like I remember like first 4 episodes of The Vinyl Collector. I think I was like, Young Az is fucking shit. Obviously, just got the logo now. I was like, he's fucking shit. And my friend was messaging me like, oh, are you worried about like people coming onto the show? Like if you want to invite music artists on, I'm like, well, I can't not say what I want to say. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, and I mean, you had a couple popular moments where you were like, you know, we're not a good team, and when you're talking about like Wan-Bissaka getting aboard and it being like a shock to the system or something like that, like yeah, so like in terms of like your persona when you're on these shows, do you feel like okay, yeah, I've got to be, can I be like the tough guy coming into the room, because you seem quite forthright when you're on these shows?
So it's funny because now, like I used to do more frequent pods before, and like because you're on it every week, yeah, like people that listen become accustomed to how you articulate your points. So like for example, yeah, I remember like in 20, I think it was that 2020 season, and like Bruno was doing really well, like scoring wise, yeah. But I actually hated his guts. Like I honestly did not care about any of the goals he was scoring. I said, this is not a sustainable way to play. And I would say that every pod, and all the comments would be like, "Oh, I know Moyo's gonna come here and start talking some negativity about Bruno." And I was thinking, boy, like that.
Yeah, you're right.
Like, and now I pod less frequently, but like people still expect me to have the beliefs that I had, like, which is why, yeah. So, like sometimes, yeah, like you still have the beliefs that like you're fine with them thinking that, but then sometimes, yeah, when if like you've changed your mind, for example, and then you're actually having to address it. Like someone on a pod will be like, "Oh, but didn't you say?" Da, 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 da.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like
happens all the time. Like you post a song of an artist you critique, it's like, well, I thought you said you didn't like that artist. I was like, no, I said I didn't like this song he dropped. Yeah.
Are we
all the time.
Pick and choose?
No, I fully got what you mean. So I was gonna ask something, that's fine. So the next thing I was gonna ask actually was, so obviously you're not on GoalDiggers as much, but one thing you do cover, which for me was quite interesting, was the Women's Super League. And the reason why I'm saying it's interesting is not because they're women, it's more because when I see you tweeting, like when Moyo says now, when she's talking about, you talk about sports all the time, she really does. Because it'd be sometimes, right, you'd be tweeting and you'd be like saying something about like, oh, Man United, da, da, da. I'm like, wait, there's a game on today? I'm like, oh shit, no, it's just women's football. And I think that's something I want to ask about, because it's so interesting, because one thing you never do, and I feel like this is intentional, like you never genderize the sport you're talking about, you just kind of just say the team. Was that something that you like what was your thought process doing that when like going in talk about music, not music, talk about music, talk about sports, sorry. And yeah, can explain that a bit further, sorry.
Yeah, so it actually wasn't intentional initially, because the scheduling for women's sport in general is kind of funny in the sense that it used to not overlap at all with the men's. So when I'd be talking about the women's, like, so for example, like when you would see me tweet about the women's and you'd be like, oh, are they playing? But no one's playing on the men's side. So like, do you know what I mean? Like that is how I would, so like I wouldn't genderize it then because like this is the only Manchester United that is playing right now. That was my thought process in the beginning. Obviously now that the games are on at the same time, I've now become so used to just not genderizing it that I can't imagine tweeting saying, oh, United women's, like, unless I'm like actually having to make a specific distinction in my week. Like, for example, there was one week here that United women played Liverpool the same weekend that United men played Liverpool.
Oh, okay, right.
So in that case, I was like, okay, let me actually do it. I'm not trying to hit the piss here. Like,
yeah.
But yeah, like, and I think as well that seeped into like other sports.
Yeah, because he did with basketball as well.
Yeah,
I see. Yeah.
So with basketball, it's a funny one because I used to watch the NBA, and then I stopped watching the NBA, and then I started watching the WNBA and still didn't go back to like the NBA. And then I started watching women's college basketball. So now, like, because I spent so long not talking about men's basketball at all, I wouldn't genderize the basketball side yet because this was the only one I was watching. That's what me. Obviously, now that I'm watching both, I'm just like, boy, it's down to you lot to decipher what I'm talking about. Like, I almost use Twitter as like I know I'm tweeting and other people can see it.
It's like going into the void, right? It's just going to it.
It's also just I'm just saying this thing out there. And if you want clarification, like you can check or you can ask. Like I've seen people saying, like some people have messaged me said, "Oh, what are United men playing?" I'll be like, "Oh no, women's." Like
to message is a bit far. Like you can just search it up. Like cool.
Yeah. Oh, that's women's. You can watch it though on BBC.
And in terms of like content creation, which one, like, because I know you haven't done a lot of football basketball stuff, but we'll get to that later. But in terms of like the football side, which side do you prefer covering? Because like, you cover both quite extensively.
Yeah. I would say, in the beginning, like my introduction to women's football was quite a funny one. I actually started watching women's football because I hated United men so much. That is actually, I'll be honest, that was my segue into it. Like
makes sense.
And then I kept seeing that, like, oh, this United. So I knew that United women's team had been made. And I was seeing they were beating teams like 9-1. So I was coming off of a 4-0 L, United men. United women are winning 9-1. Then the next week, 11-0. And I said, what? Like, I need to jump on this. Like, where is that? Like,
this feels good. Yeah.
This is what it's supposed to feel like. So that was how I actually found myself in women's football. And then in terms of the content creation side, for me, it always felt like there wasn't enough content creators in the women's side. Like in the men's side, there are so many content creators. And I used to be like, oh, it's so oversaturated. But you know what it is? Everyone actually has different opinions. Everyone, like, do you know what I mean? The space is so big that everyone should like content create if you want to content create in men's football. And I guess because the audience size is so much bigger, obviously there are more content creators.
Right, of course, yeah.
And I feel like with the women's side, there was never really like when I started watching, there was never really like discussions in the same way that there would be like for podcasts that were watching men's football. So it was like, I remember when I first started watching women's football and I didn't know anyone else that watched it. So it's like you're watching this thing in silence. It's almost like do you know what I mean? Like it's almost like you've got headphones on and you feel like no one else is watching this thing.
Yes.
And so our idea with the like actually putting energy into the women's episodes, well, first of all, I spoke to Brie, who's one of the other founders of GoalDiggers, and she was like, oh, like if you want to start this up, like please like do it. So I was like, cool. And then I was asking around the pod, a couple of the other girls watched women's football as well. So I was like, this is perfect. Like some of the new girls that had just joined watched women's football. So it was literally a perfect fit.
Right.
And it was nice as well, because then we made another group chat and we Like it was the first time as well that I had. So basically, I always had two friends that watched women's football that I met in the football space. So like they weren't my friends before I was in the football space.
Right.
So obviously I met them in the women's football space, so I knew like women's football.
Yeah.
And but it was nice to have that group and another group to be able to actually discuss stuff with, especially because at this point there was no broadcasting deals like the way they are now. So it wasn't like it's on Sky Sports. You would actually have to have an app called FA Player. Number one, FA Player is the deadest app of all time. It's the worst app ever. Like if you touch the screen at any point, it stops. Like
it's not like a whole app in itself.
It's a whole app. It's a website and it's awful. Okay. It's literally so bad. Like honestly, the broadcast deal was one of the best things that has ever happened to women's football because it meant that people could stumble across women's football. Like the app before meant that you couldn't stumble across it. You would have to be so intentional in getting to football. And I guess with us doing the women's football content, the point was also to be something that you could stumble across. Like if you're on GoalDiggers already, you could stumble across this women's football episode. Now you've gotten into women's football, which has been good. And I feel like that was the main reason because I just didn't feel like there was enough in the women's football space. And I would have discussions in the same way I would on the men's side. So we thought, let's film that. Let's record that.
So would you say you're like a pioneer or like kind of one of the people kind of pushing the popularity of the Women's Super League?
We're trying. Do you know what it is? I'll be honest, I feel like we need to be more consistent. Us on the women's side, because there is a space to be tapped in terms of in women's football, especially in the content creation space, there's like two different types of pods.
Right.
There's pods that cover like the social side, like the players.
Right.
Yeah. And then there's pods that like cover a specific team. So like Chelsea.
Oh, okay, yeah.
You know what I mean? As opposed to more broadly. And then there's a couple pods that cover everything, like both social and thing. I feel like where we can market ourselves for GoalDiggers in the women's side is that we are we can be really analytical in how we speak. I feel like that's a lot of what is missing from the women's football space. And then I think for us to actually get to the level where it's like people think of women's football content, like, and think of us is the consistency aspect, which to be honest, that a lot of that is down to me. And I need to be
right. Earlier you said you're not much of a writer, but then we go back to, I think it's about 2021, 2022, you start writing for tap-ins and tap-outs. So for someone who doesn't like writing, how did this come about?
You know what it is? I used to not be able to say no to stuff. That was actually how
It's still your pin tweet.
that was how it came about. And it's funny because I've done all my, it was my pin tweet, and I'm someone that doesn't know how to just like move on like from stuff. Like for me to actively think about something else to pin, I just can't. So that's the reason it's still there. But how it actually came about was Dan, who heads up Tap In and Tap Out, he DM'd me on Insta. No, he DM'd me on Twitter, and we'd already followed each other. Like we used to tweet each other on the TL about United. And obviously he had that page. He was writing about football. He would get people to write about football, and he would tweet and write about MMA as well. And I think he wanted to expand. And at that point, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do within the space. So when he suggested it, he was like, "Oh, do you want to be our women's football writer?" I was like, "Oh, like that sounds good. Like that sounds like a good. It would give me an opportunity to tap into a space. No pun intended.
Yeah.
It will give me the opportunity to like try something. And I'm like, I feel like I'm someone that always just wants to like, if you ask me to do something, I'll try it. And if I hate it, I won't do it again. Clearly, I didn't hate it because I did it like multiple times. And I realized that it can be nice to write, but it takes a lot out of you to write.
Of course, like, yes, 100%.
You have to not only have the thought, but you have to articulate it in a way that is like palatable for someone else. And I feel like kind of what I like about podcasting in a sense is that even though you are trying to be palatable as well, there's a bit more off the cuffness that like even if I'm not palatable, so do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's just like it's so fast paced that like there will be a part of it that is palatable, even if the whole thing isn't.
Yeah.
And I guess that is why like podcasting just still remains. I feel like with the writing side, I enjoyed it a lot. It gave me the opportunity to actually just hone in and focus on one topic. Obviously, when you're podcasting, it's like you're talking about so many different things. You might be talking about one match, and you're talking about how is this manager utilizing his squad. Then you're talking about cups. Then you're talking about like so much is going on.
Yeah.
Whereas when I was writing, it was like, cool, I've got this title. Now let me actually just go in detail on this one thing, even if it has like mini subheadings.
Right. Yeah.
It's still just in its totality about this one thing. Shout out the writers though, because that actually takes mental grit.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like for me, I like talking. I'm a bit gobby, so when it comes to like expressing an opinion, I need to kind of get it all out. I have to feel like I've left nothing on the table. So, for example, if I'm reviewing an album, I like talking like, oh, the context behind it, maybe just throw away some jokes, all that stuff. Whereas writing, you have to be a lot more formalized. Even if you're being harshly critique, you can't just say this is shit, this sounds horrible. You have to be like, oh, the sounds, stuff like that. So I think when it comes to restricting, you're like, oh wait, if I actually had to write this down, like how would I do this in like one page? And then someone's gonna edit it as well, and you're like, oh, but this is what I wanted to say and all that stuff. But yeah, it's a bit of a fact. So I just understand you on that one. Like I said, moving on to 2022, I feel like this is like if you're gonna do it like in the sports analogy, I feel like this is your breakout year, right? Because you did an episode with the National Football Museum, and then obviously you're on the Talk Sport kind of thing when you're in Box Park saying England are gonna win, which they did. But I think one thing that was, I guess the highlight or the peak of your year. And again, I say this with no disrespect to all the other shows and stuff you've been on beforehand, but I think it's one thing to kind of be on a show and it's like people who are like your peers in terms of like, oh, maybe we're the same age or maybe we're friends and talk about football. But then, and again, maybe the reach of that thing might not be as big. But then now it's like, okay, you're going to be on The Guardian. It's like, wait, like how many people read the fucking Guardian, right? And not only that, you're on with two people. I think one was Faye Carruthers, right? She has like 2 decades of sports history. And then you got Suzanne Rack, who's also has over a decade of sports journalism under her belt. So being invited onto this episode, again, it must be a different kettle of fish, right? Kind of going onto this stage. How did you feel? And how did that opportunity come about?
Yeah, so Bree, who is our like one of the fans of GoalDiggers, and she's also basically like our project manager, so to speak. Like she is the one that like does her best to get our names out there.
Right.
I think someone from the Guardian contacted them saying, oh, like we've heard some of like the girls speaking about women's football. We want to start this podcast specifically for the Euros, and if it's successful, we'll get commissioned post Euros as well. So I had a call with one of the guys from the podcast. They were basically like, it wasn't an interview. It was more so like for them to gauge how our personality would work on the show. And they were like, oh, we'll let you know if like it's a yes. So I was like, cool. In my head, I was like, let me not put pressure on it. Like, if it's not the right fit, it's not the right fit. And I feel like that's been kind of like my mindset throughout anything content, like creation wise. But yeah, so they emailed a couple of weeks later and they were like, oh, we'd love to get you on this pod. Like, it'll be for these games. So I was like, cool. So I was like, let me make sure like I watch all the games so that when I'm talking on the pod, I can actually talk in detail. Like sometimes when you only watch highlights and then they ask you something, now you're giving one word answer. Really, like you can tell when someone's like watched the game.
Yeah.
So I was like, cool. I'm gonna watch the games and give my honest opinion. And I actually made this point to someone the other day. Because I was like, when I look back now, because I've done like probably like 10 to 15 like Guardian episodes. When I look back now to the first episode I did, I was trying to be filtered. Like, and I'm not saying, obviously, you're not coming on the pod and swearing. Like, it's
of course, yeah.
So there is a level of filter, like there is a level of filtration that you're gonna need, because once again, this is not GoalDiggers. But like when I look back on it, I remember like there were some players I thought in that one, like in one particular game were shit. And I didn't say it on the pod, I was like, oh, like this wasn't her best. That's how I used to talk on the pod.
Yeah, I think this was the episode where Man City beat Man United, right? Something like
Yep,
that. Yeah.
yep, yep,
Mm-hmm.
yep, yep. Exactly that.
Mm-hmm.
And then we I recorded a pod with them a couple of weeks ago, yeah, and it was after Chelsea women had beaten United, and I went to that game. I think that was the
Okay.
only time. No, it's the second time only I've seen United women lose in the flesh.
Okay.
And I remember like they told me, "Oh, you're booked on for this pod, by the way." And I was thinking, boy, like let me go on another pod beforehand to
To
get
get it all out.
out of my system,
Yeah.
yeah, before I go and
Yeah.
I never get invited back on this pod.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember I did a pod that day. I did a pod that day, with one of my other friends. I got a lot of my system. I was cussing the living daylights out of all those players, yeah. And I said, you know what, Guardian. But then I woke up that morning, yeah, and I was like, sorry, I can't hold back. I remember having that feeling, thinking, I can't hold back.
Mm-hmm.
That day, and I remember, yeah, because I think Faye herself, yeah, was shocked. Like she was, you know what I mean? Like, I was like, I remember at that time I was thinking, I was like, I've watched this ex-player this amount of times now, and I've come to conclusion she is not good. And that was, do you know what I mean? Like, I realized I got put on this pod for the first time because of how I spoke the first time. So there's no point of me stifling completely, you know, how blunt I am or I want to be about this particular topic if this is why they let me on in the first place. So I was like, cool. And I feel like ever since then, it feels like not a weight lift off my shoulder, because I don't think it was something that I was thinking about consciously. But like, since that first time I've done it, like, I just no holding back now. Do you know what I mean? Like, if you were dead, and I'm going to say it on the pods.
Yeah, of course. And it must be a different, is it like a different reaction? Because there must be a different audience, right? People who like watch and read the Guardian. Yeah. Was that something you're conscious of? Is that why you kind of held back? Like, oh, that type of audience.
I think it is, but I think it is. I think because with GoalDiggers, I knew who the audience was. Like, I've got all the social media passes. I can see who's DMing, I can see who's liking our things. I can see. I mean, like, I know who our audience is roughly. And when we're having our team meetings, like, we've got the analytics of our followers.
Right.
Whereas with the Guardian, it felt like I'm stepping into another space that like didn't feel like I knew what I was stepping into. And like, I remember because a couple people would tweet me after the episodes and be like, "Oh, I agreed with what you said about this. I agreed with what you said about that." And I guess for me, that's when I was like, even if not everyone agrees, people are going to agree. So like, there will be some people that agree and there will be some people that disagree, and that's life. And I feel like taking off the pressure of having a statement that everyone agrees with was what helped me, essentially.
Of course. And again, with working with such tenured people, do they like, what's the working relationship like? Do they kind of give you some sort of insights or tips, or is it just kind of like you show up and you kind of meet up whenever they kind of call back?
So we they add us to a group chat the day before, and then obviously we're like, hi, everyone good, but obviously we did a pod, it's not awkward but like, you actually don't know these people. Whereas now, yeah, when I joined the pod, like Faye, who hosts every episode, Faye's always like, "Oh, Moyo, our United fan, I know you were angry. I saw your tweets about." So it's like there's so much more of a familiar relationship now.
Right. Yeah.
Or like when I see her, like when I've been in like press areas for games, like me and her always have a chat, which is nice, because when you're younger and you look at these spaces, it feels like something that's so far away, and it feels like something that like you will never understand anything about how it works. And I guess for me, being on that pod has like created some sense of like normalcy now about how it works, or like who these people are. And I like it. I like the fact that now I look at these people as normal people while still respecting them hugely for what they do.
Yeah, fair. And again, just to top up, if that wasn't enough, obviously you're still working with them to this day. So it's like a year and a half, a year and a half of like relationship so far. But to top it all off, you get to fly out to Qatar for the World Cup. And I was like, I know, like the year before, but technically last year. And I was under BComs, which is basically an organization that kind of help Black people or people of color kind of get into the sports media space. They do quite a lot actually when looking up in terms of like letting people answer questions and stuff like that. Really good organization. So again, Look, I was trying to find again the content for the Qatar World Cup, but doesn't seem to be much online. I'm sure there's a lot of reasons for that, but again, you were there for like a month, so again, what was it like kind of going to, I'm guessing it was your first time in Qatar. What was it like going to Qatar first time? And then you're actually covering sports and on the biggest stage, arguably in terms of football, right?
First of all, shout out Beacons. Beacons is honestly one of the best things that I have done within the space. And just in terms of the opportunities they've given us, but even outside of that, just like the network they've given us. I always say the best thing that I've gotten out of Beacons is the network from the people that I was doing it with. A lot of us have talents in different areas. So it's not just like everyone on BComs is trying to be a content creator. There's loads of people on BComs that are not trying to be content creators. There are a lot of people on BComs that want to be producers, that want to be directors, want to be photographers. And it's funny because we always say that like if we all had a project, like there's projects that I've done in the past that have been because of someone on BComs. So like if like one of my friends is at this sports brand and they're like, oh, I've got someone that will be good for this one thing. Like that's happened to me a lot of times.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
And like that's a lot of the reason that we've all done a lot of stuff. But yeah, so Qatar came about because BComs told us about the opportunity. I remember they told us on the final masterclass. So the way BComs works is that like it's a masterclass program. They put on masterclasses every like 2 weeks, basically.
Yeah.
Someone will come in from a particular business area within sports. So that might be content creation, it might be your journalist, it might be your videographer, you might be a brand. And like we essentially learn from you in that masterclass. And you talk about, you know, how it is you got into the space, but also what it is you see for that space in the future. And I guess for us, how it helped was that we would look at it and be like, okay, if the person from Nike, for example, says that when they're looking for people to do certain stuff, they're looking for X, Y, Z. So in your head, you're thinking, cool, the next time they pitch something, as long as I show I've got this, like I've got a good chance. So I remember on the final masterclass, they were like, cool, we've got this opportunity. Obviously, it's not confirmed yet, but we think there might be an opportunity for some people to go to Qatar. And I remember at the time, I was like, oh, like that would be sick. That would be so good. But in my head, I was like, I'm not getting it, man. Because they were like, there's 4 spots. I remember I was thinking, that's not a lot. You know what I mean? It's not a lot. We had to do like applications for it, and then attach like our portfolio, basically. And then that led to an interview. So then people got selected for an interview with who would be our manager there. And then we interviewed with him, and then we interviewed with someone else as well. And I remember I was waiting to hear back, but I was in Malta at the time. So I'd gone to Malta for DLT, and I was having
the time of your life.
The time of my life. I'd gone to Malta, and then I saw an email, and I was like, oh, we're going to call you tomorrow with a verdict. And I was thinking, I'll be real, if it's bad news, save it. Like, I'm trying to
enjoy it. Yeah.
I'm trying to enjoy myself. I remember I didn't tell my sister that they're gonna call me, but she was like, sounds like cool. They were like, are you free at this time? I was like, yeah. I went into the corridor, and they were like, oh, we really liked your interview, like we'd love for you to come on board. And I was like, wow, like, do you know what I mean? Like, sometimes, like I used to be someone that would be like, I have to hype myself and tell myself I'm gonna get it. But then I was like, that doesn't really work. So do you know what I mean? That sounds like, so now I'm like, I'm very much of the same as like, if it's meant to be, it's meant to be. So I was like, I didn't put any pressure on this, like getting that. When they told me I got it, it was even more of a shock. So Qatar now was 6 weeks. I was there for 6 weeks in Qatar. We went there like 3 weeks before the tournament started because like to like acclimatize.
Of course,
because it was literally November and it was 35 degrees in our place. Like it was so hot. To acclimatize and then to get our training, because a lot of what we were doing was like the publishing sites, like press conference related stuff.
Okay, yeah.
So they wanted us to know how to use the software, where the translation teams at, like what interviews were supposed to go to what country, and that sort of thing. I would say like that Qatar experience was so good because it was the first time I was like, wow, like they're really paying people to be abroad and do this sort of thing that in my head feels like fun. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
in my head it feels like fun. I was like, they're really like, do you know what I mean? They're really sending people out to do these sorts of
Yeah.
things. And I guess that was the first time I was like, no, there's like, obviously, I think that is the intention of BComs, to show you that there is and there are roles that are not the traditional roles that we're shown like when we're younger.
Of course, yeah.
And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. Like I met so many people. I networked with so many people out in Qatar because everyone that was there was just on good vibes. They're like, we're abroad and we're in the heat. Like when we go back to London, we're literally being met by snow and rain.
And that's the coldest months of the year for the Middle East as well.
This is it. Like,
mm-hmm.
Yeah, it honestly, it was amazing.
Yeah. Did you get to watch the final?
I didn't. I was back in London.
Oh no. Oh yeah.
I think I came back semi-final.
Right. Okay.
Final. But I went to go and watch the quarter. So I watched the quarters, all the quarters, when I was out there.
Okay. And so that kind of leads to one of the next things I want to talk about, which is, again, you make a lot of content, right? For someone who has a full ass time job, obviously you work in like a finance analyst, right? So like you have okay, all right, cool. That kind of goes to my next thing, because to have that job where it's like, okay, it's a very corporate job in terms of most of the time you're going to be in the office and you probably have a lot of deadlines. Where did you find the time to kind of make so much content? Because I think one thing about people who say they want to make content, it's like, oh, where's the time, and this and the other. But then you took 4 weeks of that, and I guess that was a bit of your annual leave as well to gonna go to Qatar. So yeah, how do you balance it?
Yeah, it's tough. I'll be real, like it's really tough, especially because I'm trying to set myself goals in terms of like what I want to have achieved by like the beginning of each year or the end of every year. I write like down what I want to achieve the next year in terms of like sports and content. And it's hard because some of the stuff you're thinking, I need to do it, but where is the time? Recently I have moved out of finance, but still not doing sport full time, which is, I always say to people, I used to think I wanted to do sport full time. Now I think I don't know if I can do sport full time. I feel like I almost like the fact that it's like my separation from work.
Like reality. It's kind of like, all right, okay.
Yeah, like when I was doing, there was a point, like I've done sports stuff consistently for 3 months and no other work. And I was thinking, this is only fine for me right now because I know that I'm about to do something else after those 3 months.
Right.
But I love the fact that like when I'm not doing sports, I look forward to those times when I am doing it. Yeah. So like, for example, if I've got like an interview lined up, or like if I know we're doing this really cool piece of content with a club, I have that one thing in my calendar that's like, oh, no matter how treacherous this work week is, I've got one thing that will save me. And that is why I like it. But yeah, it's really tough. It's honestly really tough. And I think it helps as well, though, having the community of girls, especially the GoalDiggers girls, but also the BComs people as well. Because every time you want to slack, they remind you about your goals, basically. They remind you about stuff you said you wanted to do. Like I recently, well, I say launched, I haven't done my first launch post. Yeah.
Her Sports Spotlight, right? Right, again to
exactly that. The last time I went to a BCom social, they were like, where's that page you said? Like, honestly, like there's no breathing time. They remind you about the stuff you said you're gonna do. And it's nice because like we're all holding each other accountable, and we're doing this because we know that so many months ago we all said this one thing, and it's like, let's do it then.
Yeah. And let's expand on that. So what is the kind of the goal with Her Sports Spotlight? So for those who don't know, it's a Instagram placeholder page now for you to kind of like put on your own content. And I feel like everyone who makes content for a specific like organizational group, they always have that feeling of, I can just do it myself. But they had that feeling, okay, I want to kind of do it myself type of thing. I'm guessing that was that kind of the feeling. Yeah. What are you trying to achieve with your own content?
Yeah, I think for me, it was that like I watch so many sports here, and I feel like I enjoy so much like women's sports, and I want people to understand how good some of these female athletes are. and that's essentially the point of the page, to literally just spotlight excellence within the female space of sports. And it's going to be like multi how will I describe it? It's going to be a mixture of stuff. It's going to be like voice stuff, it's going to be like video
Right.
clips, it's also going to be like compilation videos, so like a bit of everything.
Okay.
So when I choose the person that I'm spotlighting that week, it will be like a week, and it will be a different post like every 2 or 3 days within that week, doing like each different format. So we'll let you not only like hear my opinion on why I think this person is excellent, but also for you to see visually like what they're actually doing. But yeah, that's the main reason. I think obviously with GoalDiggers, it's amazing but it's like, and I get to talk about what's happening within like women's football. But then I just think I'm limiting myself in terms of like I watch basketball, I watch tennis, I watch athletics. Do you know what I mean? Like there's so many people that need to be shouted about, that like there's like I could do that. I could very easily do that. I say very easily. Oh, now
no, I think you could, because there's sometimes you'd be like, oh yeah, South Carolina versus LSU. I'm like, who the fuck is watching that, mate? Like, honestly, I'm like, hell, but like, it gets me intrigued, because I'm a big sports fan. I like competition, so it does make me look, okay, what's going on here? So I think there's definitely a route for that. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's the plan. That is the plan.
Okay, cool. Kind of a few more questions to kind of round it off. One of the things I want to ask you, just to kind of cool us down. So, in terms of the Women's Super League, what's one of the main kind of storylines this season that, if you could tell like the casual fan, what's like one or two main storylines you think people should follow if they have no sort of like interest in football or anything like that, just the storyline itself? What would you say?
Okay, cool. I would say one of the biggest storylines of WSL this season is Chelsea women's. And the fact that Emma Hayes, who's been their long-serving manager, is leaving at the end of the season. She's going to become USA Women's National Team coach, which is funny.
Okay,
what is a Brit doing in America, really? Yeah. But listen, she's a fantastic coach, so I absolutely hear it. And they're going to pay her the bag. And my motto always is chase the bag, sis. So fair at enough. This point, I hear it. Yeah. And I think the narrative for me this season and Chelsea is that, are they going to go out with a bang? Because Chelsea have been a dominant team in the league. They've won, I think, four out of the last 5 leagues, or 5 out of the last 6, I think.
Wow, okay, like a Manchester City, gosh.
Yeah. Honestly, it's something crazy like that, extremely dominant. So, number 1, are they going to go out with a bang? And number 2, what is the transition period going to look like for Chelsea? So, like, obviously, they've not announced yet who's going to be taking over from Emma Hayes. That's one of the narratives that obviously is running through the league. But also, like, what this means for Chelsea, like, is Emma Hayes going to start doing little things to build up her squad for the next manager?
Right.
Or is it going to be a case of, you know what, I'm trying to win now and quick, let's get this done? Yeah, that's an interesting one for sure. I'll definitely keep an eye on Chelsea. And they're missing out on one thing. The only thing Emma Hayes has not won since she's been the manager is the Champions League. Gosh, she desperately wants to win the Champions League.
So it's literally like a female Pep, honestly.
Honestly, she badly wants to win that Champions League. They've come close. They've been to the final before. Let's see if this season will be the season.
And what about one for basketball?
One for basketball. Oh, good one. Should we do college or WNBA?
Either or. Which one do you find more interesting?
Oh, it's nice because they don't run at the same time. So okay, cool. One takes over from the next. Cool. I'll say right now, because I'm watching college basketball, it's a college basketball season right now. I would say the narrative, like the storyline for this season is South Carolina won the championship, not last year, the year before that. And then they lost in the Final Four last year. And their whole team, pretty much, I'm not joking, like out of their starting 5, 4 of them went into the draft. So they basically lost their whole starting.
Gosh, yeah.
So on all the polls, they were like ranked down. They were like, well, we're not even going to rank them in the top 10. Like, for all we know, we don't even know what this team is going to be.
Yeah, because there's been some shit players coming in. Yeah.
But surprisingly, yeah, they're still the only unbeaten team so far this season. They've won every single game. And I think the narrative for us is, can this young, inexperienced team, but with an experienced coach, win it all, basically? That's probably the most interesting. Well, that and the fact that Caitlin Clark is like killing the game.
Oh, was that the one that had the controversy a couple of years ago? Was that the one I'm thinking about?
Oh, it was no, that was it was someone else. I know who you're talking about. I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, the
But yeah,
Caucasian lady. Yeah.
like, they're trying to argue that she might be the best like college player of all time. That
Right.
is cap, but
Okay.
that is cap. But I will say she's the best player right now,
Okay.
and she's arguably the best shooter. I could give her the best shooter.
Okay.
Player, it's a bit crazy, but for sure, like fantastic player. She's almost not almost definitely. She's definitely going number one pick if she enters the draft this year, which she should. But yeah, let's see what she can do because obviously she wants to go out with a bang with Iowa. They got to the final last year and lost. So let's see what they can do this year as well.
Cool. So looking forward, what is next for Moyo? We've done so much so far. Seems like things are kind of going nicely. What is next? What can we expect from Moyo in 2024?
What you can expect from me is number one to launch that page because so far we got like honestly like the Instagram is going to delete that account, but if I don't post it, cool. So that number one, launch the page completely and post frequently. One of the other things I really want to do this year is do more interviews. I did a couple interviews with players. I've done interviews with players in the past, but I want to do more. I want to add that to my repertoire. Like I actually enjoy chatting to people. And especially when it's someone that like I respect as like an athlete. So definitely more of that this year. And just everything I was doing at a better level, but then plus those three.
So my final question, just to kind of make it a bit fun. So I'll give you a scenario. Again, I'll leave it a bit open-ended. So you can choose the sport for this one in terms of men's or women. It's going to be football related. And I'm going to stick it to Man United, that's your team.
Cool.
So let's say Anita comes to Earth, right? And it's like a shooting contest, right? Aliens are fantastic, everything. If we don't win this, we're gone. It's a wrap. So we need to basically create the perfect player. We have the lab for it, right? We can create the perfect player. We're sticking to strikers here. And what we need the best attributes of each player that we have so far, right? So we need the best kind of person with dribbling, the best person when it comes to shooting, the best person because all the attributes of a striker. So yeah. So which attributes of each player would you pick to create this super player and why?
United, yeah. And it has to be current players.
It can be old or new. Old or new.
Okay. Heading ability. Cristiano Ronaldo.
Okay. Why Cristiano?
He is just honestly, that's the best header of the ball I've ever seen because the heights he gets to just don't make any sense. And it can't be replicated. He can outjump anyone. So it has to be him. It has to be him.
Cool.
Ooh. What the other components?
So you got dribbling, shooting.
Cool.
You can do penalty taking as well.
Cool. Penalty taker, Juan Mata.
Okay.
Penalty taker, Juan Mata. Dribbling. Ooh. Oh no, hold on. Shooting. Van Nistelrooy.
Right. Yeah.
Van Nistelrooy. Dribbling. There's someone that plays for United Women. Her name is Jace. She's Brazilian. Honestly, like when someone says they're a take-on specialist, that's a take-on specialist. The end product, it might not be good at the end, but she's gonna dribble. But she's gonna be honestly, like I think she does like honestly, there was one game recently she did like 40 take-ons in a game and she won like and she won like 38 of those take-ons. I said, yeah. This is a take-on, cool. First of all. And then so I've done dribbling, heading, shooting.
I don't think you did dribbling. Oh, did you do dribbling? You did shooting. Jace. Oh yeah, Jace dribbling. Yeah. Penalty. You did penalty taking.
Yeah.
I guess we have one more for free kicks.
Free kicks. David Beckham.
Fair enough. Look, at the end of this interview, do you have any final thoughts? Anyone you like to shout or say hello to?
Oh, I would as always, shout out GoalDiggers, my favorite pod.
Yeah.
My favorite pod, shout out GoalDiggers. And who else? No one else.
Yeah.
Shout out you, honestly, for conducting a fantastic chat. Like, I love when an interview feels like a chat.
Yeah.
And you've definitely done that. So
Thanks, man. No worries. Thanks for coming on.
of course.